So here's the recording for the class we had this Tuesday on 221, image orientation sliced planes, and also on the website TTE Toronto, virtual TTE Toronto. And I put this up on the board just for purposes of realization that the American Society of Echo establishes the content of all echo material, and especially we didn't go over this in complete detail, the examination you're going to take. Provides recommendations for technical performance and appropriate use of instrumentation during an examination. Provides guidance for the integration of the various ultrasound-based imaging modalities into the comprehensive examination. It describes best practices for the measurement and display of the data generated by the comprehensive examination. So basically, the American Society of Echo provides guidelines for us, and everybody's pretty much agreed to abide by those guidelines to measure where their suggestions are made to measure, to evaluate in the method that they recommend. Again, it's all recommendations, and all labs pretty much abide by these recommendations anywhere you go. So we discussed the image, the orientation, what the index marker is for, and how to orient the marker to the proper position so we get our image on the screen where it should be. In our scan windows, we talked a little about the scan windows. We talked about the body plane orientation, sagittal, frontal, transverse, anterior, posterior, top, bottom, left, right, so on and so forth. And we discussed basically how the heart differs a little bit between other ultrasound modalities. Echo is, whereas in the general ultrasound modality, the point of reference is on the left based on this point of reference for a human being and how we lay that out. With the heart, the point of reference is on the right based on the cut planes and how we slice and dice the heart. And we talked about the long axis plane, the short axis plane being our two major planes of the heart. And we have this to the apical plane, which comes right up through, if you would, just, excuse me, transversely, if you will. Excuse me, coronally, if you will. This would be transverse, but coronally and sagittally, and straight through the heart is basically how we image the heart. And this comes out of Boulware's book. He's a doctor down in the DC, excuse me, not DC, but Boston area, who's published several books, and I think they're really good for the cardiac sonographer, more for the sonographer versus the physician, and describing the orthogonal anatomical planes, orthogonal being just right angles to each other, and how we divide the heart up, short axis, long axis, and so on and so forth, coronal frontal planes, and sagittal, and degrees, and all that stuff. His book, I think, is a really good book, if you have a chance to pick up him as a reference, Boulware. Our standard orthogonal planes for the heart, we've talked about these, we discussed these at length today. The peristernal long, we got the peristernal short axis, we got the four chamber. We didn't discuss that as much today. We'll go into that later on. And this just shows the cuts and planes of that. So we'll dig into this more in further review. We're going to dig into each image plane. So, and again, we beat up the index marker, which is actually relevant for us, indicates the spatial orientation of the scan plane. It serves as a guide for our transducer orientation and how we maneuver and what shows up on the screen during the exam. And by convention, it indicates the part of the image that appears on the right side of display in echo. And again, all other organs, they'll show up on the left side of the display. It's where the image mark would be. And when you go, when you turn your probe, looking basically head to toe in general ultrasound, the feet are considered to be down here, and the head's considered to be up here. So the head's on the right side, feet are on the left side. And you don't have to know that. It's just pointing out the differences. And we talked about our scan windows, our notch, right, apical, subcostal, apical over here, right apical. Don't use that too much, right apical. That would be a shortened version of the apical, basically showing the right side. We do slide into that, particularly I stay on this side of the sternum for that. We talked what para means alongside the sternum. We talked about what rib space we typically image the heart in, generally the third and fourth intercostal rib spaces. Oftentimes on patients we can't actually count those rib spaces down because there's just too much tissue over that, but we can kind of, once you get a feel of where you're going to find the heart, you'll just know where to go, so to speak. We talked about our subcostal and some practice the subcostal view today. Again, transducer position windows and so on and so forth. In this clip here, we just showed the basically how to move the probe if you want to cut through the heart with the Toronto website. We cut through the heart longitudinally this way here, parasternal long axis, and we just tilt the probe. Basically tilt this way or that way, or aim the probe that way or this way to see our different views of the heart. And parasternally short axis wise, we just tilt the probe, tail goes up and down as opposed to back and forth for our cut planes here. And our index marker for the long axis is pointing this way towards the patient's right shoulder. And in this one here, it's pointing towards the patient's left shoulder. You picture the person here, their head here, and their feet here, and their arms here. We rotate the probe clockwise about 90 degrees from here, right? We're going to go right over to this point here, and we get our short axis views by aiming up or down and by moving up or down a rib space. Again, just showing what we see here in our views when we do that, where you rock away from the transducer and rocking towards the see the orientation marker here. Again, our head would be up here and our feet would be down here. And if you rock the index marker away from the orientation marker, if you're going to rock it down this way here, you can tilt this image here either this way or that way, and you can see with the image in this one here, you've rotated toward the index marker, which is rotating this way here, downward like this, and you see the image has picked up on the tip. You know, it's just a little bit higher here than it was in the RVs. This is more like a square on, where this one here is kind of angled down just a little bit. You see the difference between these probes, or one is angled more this way and one is more angled more that way. So you tilt this way to get the image to move on the screen. Here's our orientation marker up here. So what we're aiming at, what our index marker is pointing to, will show up on the right side of the screen, which is going to be, in this case here, when you slice and dice this out, it's going to be the aorta and the parasternal view here. So rotate the probe to the right shoulder and rotate the probe to the left shoulder, and here's what you get. We're talking about the long axis, and we're talking about the short axis view. And if we move the probe either this way, that's going to get the short axis view. If we go straight up and down with our index marker pointing to the right shoulder, we get this view here. If we turn it 90 degrees clockwise, we get the short axis view here from basically the same window is what we should get, although we know by now that that's not always the case. We have to kind of make a little small adjustment here and there. And with our apical windows, we can see that we can go up and down to either get down in this position here. We can either get the whole heart aiming through here and cut through sort of this place here, or aim up and cut through here. We can cut through all these different slice planes just basically by staying in the same rib space, but you also can move up a rib space too if you want. But remember what's going to happen. If, say, you're in this position here and you're shooting through the ventricle and got a nice cut through there, if you move up a rib space, what's going to happen is this probe is going to move up to here, and you're going to foreshorten. You're going to miss this part of the ventricle, okay, the apical part, just because you moved up a rib space. Now, sometimes you have to do that because you just can't get down into this and can't see anything from down here. You're too far away. So we have to make adjustments as sonographers to the best presentation of what we're trying to see, and the reading doc understands that once they know that we're competent in what we do. If we don't get the perfect image, or we have to cut off the apex a little bit, they understand this was a tough scan. They just couldn't get into that window. And again, this is from the four chamber view and how you can rotate the probe. See how this is going position 1, 2, 3, 4, and how you can slice through here. In the perfect patient, you could actually get the pulmonic valve in there from the four chamber view. Think about that for a second. You could probably do that on Bob. And then if you rotate to position 2, you kind of get this slice here, kind of a foreshortened ventricle, but you have a really good shot of the aortic valve, and that's maybe what you're looking for in that view there, just a simple rotation of that. And if you rotate to the third position, that perfect four chamber view here, right? This is what we get for our one of our major views here. And then if you go to the position number 4, you're going to foreshorten things, and the coronary sinus is going to come in. You're kind of looking more downward at the ventricle, and the ventricle is going to be kind of cut off. Atria is going to be missing, and you're going to see this image here. So that was the end of that. So then we went and visited the site, the TTE Toronto, and you can see I'm recording this. You can actually see the website up here. And we looked at some peristernal views primarily, and that's what we'll do each class. We'll break down the views into the peristernal and so on and so forth. And as you know, we have our rib cage on here, and we can actually take our rib cage off and see our heart, and we can see where, for example, to get this view over here, and I'm going to put the show the orientation markers on there. And if you take those off, you can see that. See our marker right up here, though? You can see the marker right up here, which is where where orientation markers point, index markers pointing at, whatever that's pointing at should show up on this side of the screen. As you can see, that does. It's pointing up towards the aorta here, and the aorta's over here. But there's a P right there, placement marker. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. So our green should show on this side, as we discussed, and our red on this side here for our guides. And so if we spin this around a little bit, and like I said, I want you guys to kind of play around with this. We can see where our cut plane is in relation to even the back side of the heart, which would actually be the posterior side, if you will, or the anterior and posterior. Well, we won't call it posterior, but anyway, that side of posterior is actually down here, but what's closer to the rib cage. And then we went through and talked about if we cut our slice off, what we would see if we rotated the heart around. We could see which slice was removed. And as you can see in this situation here, the left side of the heart's removed, and what's left is everything beyond that. And you're looking right through the right ventricle, and so you can see up here that peers right through the right ventricle. Right. And you can see how the machine takes the cut and spins it around, from there, and flips it up and turns it into this here. And I know the spatial stuff can be kind of challenging if you just kind of follow the green line and sort of follow it, up in there, like that there, right? And then we could actually look at the subject matter we see in there, the structures of the heart, and we see the RVOT with the right ventricle up here. We see the IVS, that stands for intraventricular septum, aortic valve, and this shows you the RCC is the right coronary, non-coronary cusp in that position there, and then you see the mitral valve where it says here AMVL, anterior mitral valve leaflet. PMVL is posterior mitral valve leaflet in this view here. And you can actually break it down into the cusps, if you want, of the mitral valve, where you see A1, A2 here, and A1, P1 here, and you can slide through and see different ones, P2, A2, and A2, P2, and so on and so forth. This is the descending thoracic aorta. You can see this coming down, how we're slicing through that, and this is where it is right here. So you'll always see this in your image on a patient. It may look at a little bit in different places, but that'll always be there. And you don't want to mistake this for a dilated coronary sinus. A coronary sinus would be up in here, and it would be right in this area here above the pericardium there. That was the peristernal long axis view. And then we looked at the right ventricular inflow view. And we can see this here, how that cut plane view, the slice off, how we're cutting through that view there. If you bring the heart around to its correct orientation, which is right here. Again, we can move up and down here. We can look at the heart, flip it up around, what have you. And we can see that our probe, instead of going straight into the heart, has rotated. We've taken the tail and moved it over to the right a little bit, and that's going to emphasize this part of the heart over here, where you can see the right ventricular inflow is just this section here. So when we go and cut that off, we can see what happens is the whole heart comes off, and we're looking right through the right side of the heart over here. So this is the part we're looking at. So the back side, what's behind this right here would be just the outer layer of the right side of the heart, right ventricular wall. And we can see our tricuspid valve in this view. We have our right ventricle at the top and left atrium, right atrium at the bottom. Right atrium at the bottom. We have our IVC coming here, and we have our coronary sinus right in here somewhere. And up in here, if we would cut even further through there, we'd actually be able to bring in the superior vena cava, which runs right beside the aorta here, but we're cutting below that, so we don't see the superior vena cava, but it is right here. And in a transesophageal view, we would be able to see the superior vena cava much better. And then we went to the parasternal long axis right ventricular outflow view, and put our heart back in the normal position here, which is how the heart sits in the body, the aorta going straight down. And you can see our probe, instead of being straight up and down on the heart, the tail is tilted this way, and we're kind of looking that way. The flashlight's aiming that way there. We're cutting off this part right here. Here, you see it slicing through there, and then it's slicing back through here, and how we're getting this part here, and this part here is just going to fall away, and we're going to look through the major portion of the heart here. If you look at the view slice on here, you can see that part's just going to fall away, and we're going to be looking right through. This is going to be turned up, right? See the green line? Put over here, right over here. So, and then we can put our labels on. Our labels on, and see, we have our RVOT right up in here, and then we have our pulmonic valve, and we would have the anterior and left leaflet in through here. Main pulmonary artery is coming right down through here, and then the pulmonary artery will branch. We don't work too high up to see this branch, and it's going to branch into the left and right branches. You got the aortic or the aortic valve kind of sitting over here, and left atrium, left upper pulmonary vein kind of sneaking in there a little bit, and you've got the aorta sneaking in over here a little bit. And there we went on to the short axis view at the aortic valve level. Let's bring our heart orientation back to normal, and you can see we're in instead of our index marker pointing over to the right shoulder, we're now pointing to the left shoulder. We've turned our probe clockwise 90 degrees, and now we're going to slice through the heart like a loaf of bread right down through it, just straight down this way here. And we're kind of aiming up a little bit, and if we aim up a little bit right at the base there, we see the aortic valve, and we see the right, left, and non-coronary cusps. And if you look closely right here while this is playing, you can pause this a little bit, just move this along and play around with this. And see this little mark right there, little cut in right there. That there would be that we see right, left. That's the ostium to the left main artery right there, which is going to divide into the coronary, circ and LAD there. But that's the left main right there. And you can sometimes pick up the right side as well. And don't forget this information that's available down here. I can't put all of that on my screen, but remember to go through how to obtain these view and these details, how to optimize, and so on and so forth, just for your own good, so to speak. And as you can see, if we aim, kind of right straight through the heart, we're going to be right at the mitral valve level, A1, A2, A3, P1, P2, P3, and we're going to have the mitral valve right there. And now notice along the side you have a scale. They don't show it on here, but you do have a scale, a depth scale in centimeters along the side here, and that depth scale will adjust depending on you adjusting your depth on the machine. Either you go deep or shallow, and these centimeter, the scale will either show more, it'll extend out to 15, 20 centimeters, or it'll shorten up to 10 to 12 centimeters, depending on how you adjust your depth scale there. This is our cut. We can see where we cut through and where that comes out all the way around there, and we know what's going to come off in this view. We know we're going to lose the apex if you do the slice off, and we're going to be looking up through the heart. So if you just hold this right here and look up through, you're looking in this image here, you're actually looking up through the mitral valve, so on and so forth. And then if you look at the mid-level, we've just taken our probe and just aimed slightly differently. We're now, instead of looking tilted up a little bit, we're now kind of straight on, tilted down just a little bit, right at the papillary level. This is where the paps would be. The mitral valve would be right here. The aortic valve would be right through here. This is somewhere in this area here. This is the pulmonary artery, but the aortic valve would be right underneath that there. So we're at the pap level. We got the anterolateral and posterior medial paps here. This is the anterior and lateral, and this is the anterolateral wall over here, and this is the infralateral wall. So that'll wrap it up. I'll end it there, and we will be reviewing these almost on a daily basis to try to hammer this stuff in, and then we'll move on and do the other. Next week we'll do the other cut planes, and we'll do each cut plane each time, and make sure you study this this TTE, virtual TE Toronto. Go in and dig around in this, and make sure you look at some of the details and stuff down here, how to obtain this view, and anything else that's on that page that would be helpful for you. Okay? All right. See you guys next Tuesday. And I'll try to post the next, for next Tuesday, I'll try to post that this weekend, so you'll have a little time to review that. Okay, thank you guys.